I mean, the world wouldn't be freaking out about our engagement being so low if it was so low for decades.
Right.
So has this been a slippery slope? Was there things we started doing in the, 1800s, 1900s, 1980s, 1990s, like got us here? Or what's the phenomenon, do you think that?
I think part of what it is people starting to realize how important human connection is and starting to have almost this hunger for human connection. I actually just this morning, and of course I don't remember the name of the book, but there was a doctor on the Today Show this morning, and her topic was really about loneliness. It was more from the personal side in relationship building, but it was talking about the world is much lonelier than it used to be, and how important it is to be very intentional about connecting with other people. And I think that mental health and wellness has created the awareness, which has maybe been the shift.
Did she suggest a catalyst to that? I mean, like what happened if like somewhere major shift had to happen? Yeah. Did she give a hint to that?
I think most of where she was looking at was post-COVID. So COVID was just a huge...
So everybody goes inside, withdrawals, shelter in place.
Right. And again, you had to be very intentional during that time in order to stay connected to the people who matter most. But the other thing is a lot of people got really comfortable in that COVID world, in that isolation world, even if it was with small groups, because there are individuals who maybe their interpersonal skills are very strong in small groups. They don't want to be in large groups, but the strong groups or the smaller groups are much better. And so that COVID, that was comfortable to them, and they want to stay in that type of world post-COVID, both in their personal and professional relationships.
So if we were talking about personality types, there's a stereotypical introvert, which we assume is somebody that doesn't want to be around people, right? In that context. Do you think COVID gave those people an opportunity to be more visible? Or do you think the people that were more extroverted found there's some sanity in doing less stuff?
Probably those that I have interacted with. I think the extroverts, including myself, appreciated the chance to slow down a little bit. And you talk about kind of the introverts. One of the studies that I recently was looking at was talking about engineers. And engineers, they are very technical, uber smart, and typically, are comfortable being a little more isolated. So we have to be really careful when we're looking at our people managers who are engineers, where do we need them to perform? And how do we make sure that when being a people manager may not be what they're most interested in, we need their expertise. How do we make sure they're comfortable in that space?
What are you finding leaders wrestle with most with this soft skill? We'll call connectedness a soft skill. What are the leaders wrestling with? Like, you go in and you're saying raise this awareness. How do they justify the expense of being connected? Or what are they wrestling with?
Yeah. The main thing they're really wrestling with is time. Time is what is competing with almost everything. And so they feel like, and I say feel like because I challenge it a lot, they feel like I don't have time to be connected, or I don't have time to have that in-depth conversation, or I have the solution. I don't have time to let someone on my team try to figure it out when I know exactly what to tell them to do. And so when they're looking at that time, it's like rush to deliver the results that they're trying to deliver. And what I try to help leaders understand is sometimes that time, that pause that I ask them to take, it could be a 10 or 15 second pause. It doesn't have to be something that's long and going to take days or hours for them to do. It's just showing you care and slowing down to build those relationships and build the trust. So when your team doesn't know what to do, or they make a mistake, or they're maybe lost, they're not afraid to come ask you because they trust that you have their back. They trust that you're going to support them in making either correcting a decision or making sure you make the right decision.
I think it was Craig Groeschel at Global Leadership Summit last year said trust is at an all-time low. He had found some stats around that. Do you concur? Trust is an all-time low?
I really do. And what's interesting, and we talked a little bit about it before we got started here, and I have a good friend who just wrote an article on the return to office mandate and how it is impacting trust because many don't believe that their organizations trust them, which is why they don't allow them to work remote or hybrid situations. And so that is, again, whether it's true or not is to be seen. But the feeling that your employees have is that you don't trust them. So if you're requiring them to come back into the office, you maybe have a very, very solid business case for that. But you have to explain to your people why it's required and what the difference makes. I mean, you think about some of these buildings and they pay rent, 365 days a year. It's not like if they're not occupied a few days that they get a cut on their rent. That's a business decision. So making sure that employees understand why can help reduce that breaking of the trust.
There's a book that's been around forever, The Great Game of Business, and I'm actually listening to the Audible version of it now. And that was a big thing for them was they were faced with going out of business or being transparent with the numbers with the employees and trusting them to understand the numbers, training them how to understand them in some cases, but that they would do better with knowledge and information than if it were withheld.
Right.
What's your experience been? You may not have worked for a company that's fully transparent with their numbers like the Extreme would be, but do you think employees tend to trust companies that trust them?
Yes, absolutely. It's a two-way street. I mean, you have to trust your employees, but your employees have to trust you as well. Because if there's trust broken in either direction, the performance, the relationship, the connectedness, as we're talking about, is not going to be there. And so one of the things that we see is that the trusting organizations have more ability or are more likely to engage their employees and empower their employees to perform autonomously and be able to, and that builds trust when you can perform autonomously. And so then on the flip side is if they are not empowering their teams and not allowing them to do autonomous work in many cases, then that trust is broken.
Do you think this RTO, return to office shift, there's, it could be multiple episodes just on that one topic.
Yes.
But it was kind of thrust upon the world, right? So it feels like the systems weren't in place to understand who is contributing what. There was a lot of reliance on proximity.
Right.
Whether it's, you call it micromanagement or leadership or whatever you want to call it. There was a lot of businesses flowed around this written or unwritten system of proximity. I'm wondering what you've seen as far as, is it the fact that the systems, we don't have a way to know if somebody's actually contributing because we're used to proximate management.
Right.
Would that be? part of, or a culprit, if not the culprit?
It is, because what happens is the proximity is I can walk by their desk and I can see that they're sitting there working. I can see that they're attending meetings. I can see that, they're in their office from, 8 to 5 or 8 to, whatever time they need to be there. And so that proximity really builds a false sense of trust, because you assume that they're doing their job, that they're there, that they're being productive. What we're seeing with some of the remote and hybrid situations is leaders not knowing because of the proximity, unless they are very intentional about putting practices into place in order to know that their employees are delivering what they're expecting them to. And that goes, one, with setting very clear expectations, staying connected to make sure that they're delivering the results, and having that trusted relationship. One of the articles that I read recently said that leaders who lead remote and hybrid teams are outperforming their in-person leaders by 2.5%. I actually thought that statistic was extremely high. That's what the data said, so leave it there. But as I continued to kind of dig into it a little bit, it was simply because those leaders were making a more thoughtful and intentional effort to make sure they knew what their team was doing and delivering. They were setting clear expectations, and they were staying connected more so than someone in the office in person was normally doing on a daily basis.
And probably over communicating, which we tell people all the time. But when they're in person, it feels like we've had enough communication.
Right. So that additional communication, that additional effort, that, is making a difference in the productivity and the connection.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.